Welcome to A Cartoonist's Guide to the Bible. I'm Steve Thomason, and in this video, we're going to do a walk through the story of Paul and Silas in Acts chapter 16. And I'm going to show you the visual commentary, some resources that you can use in your own study, preaching, and teaching. So let's dive in. So in order to access this, just go to cartoonistbible.com. And you'll notice that I updated the homepage a little bit, a couple new things since we are in the season of Easter and we're following the narrative lectionary. That's what we do in the church that I serve, Easter Lutheran Church in Eagan, Minnesota. The narrative lectionary is looking at Acts and Philippians this season. So I've got direct links to that. And I've also put this on the homepage. If you want to get updates on a weekly basis to all the latest downloads, visual commentaries, Bible resources from Cartoonist Guide to the Bible, totally for free. Just put your email address in here, click subscribe. And every Monday I send out an update for what's new. So I'd love to have you join me there. So we're going to just click right here on Acts. At any time, remember, you can hover over the bookshelf and come directly to Acts. But here we go. We're going to click on Acts. And we've been working our way through Acts the last couple of weeks. And if you click on the view interactive outline, you'll see that last week we were in Acts chapter 9, where we had the conversion of Saul on the road to Damascus. And the narrative lectionary skips over chapters 10 and 12, which really focus in on Peter and his encounters with Cornelius and how the Holy Spirit just blows Peter's mind, expands Peter's cultural boundaries, theological imagination. It's awesome. And then we also skip over chapters 13 and 14, where Paul is commissioned by the church in Antioch to go out into this region of Galatia, and he plants churches. He talks with Jews and Gentiles alike. It's an amazing story. And then today we come here. I'm going to click on this thumbnail to drill down into the story of Acts chapters 15 and 16. Now, in chapter 15, Paul comes back from his first missionary journey, and we have this big thing called the Jerusalem Council, where the big debate for the Jewish disciples of Jesus was whether or not Gentiles had to first become Jewish in culture in order to be true followers of Jesus. And the symbol of them becoming Jewish would be for the men to be circumcised. It's a huge debate. They decide that no, they don't have to become Jewish first. So Paul goes and he writes the letter to the Galatians. You can see here, here's some commentary on all of that and how it relates to Galatians. Here's a link to look at Cartoonist Guide to Galatians. But then we come to the story of chapter 16, which is the context for Paul and Silas. So here we go. Just some context. I put this sign here, Holy Detour, because it tells us that Paul was actually intending to go to the city of Ephesus, which was down here. Now, Ephesus would have made total sense for Paul because it was a hub. It would be like going to LA. You know, it's like everybody comes in and out of Ephesus. It's a big booming city. But instead, it says that the Holy Spirit kept him from going there, and he ended up going to Troas instead. And while at Troas, he has this vision of someone from up here in Macedonia, says, come and visit me. So from this point on, this is an important part to understand the language of the story of Acts, is it switches into a first person we. So many scholars believe that the author of Luke Acts joined the Apostle Paul in Troas. Whoever that person was, Luke, is now speaking in the first person. We did this and we did that. And so it's this traveling party is at least Paul, Silas, Timothy, and Luke. And so these four and possibly others, they hop on over to a city called Philippi. And when they get to Philippi, they come to a place of prayer, which means that, so Philippi was a Roman colony, and there weren't enough Jewish people in Philippi to have an actual synagogue. And so when there was just a handful of Jewish people, they would find a place, often by a river, and it was called a place of prayer. And Lydia, who we learn is from Thyatira, she's there. Now, we don't know if she's actually a Jewish woman or if she is a Greek or Roman woman who is very open to or is has become a Jewish woman. We're not exactly sure, but what we do know about her is that she's wealthy. She is a trader of purple, which was a very precious commodity in that culture. And so she hears the good news of Jesus, the Messiah, and she and her whole household are baptized. And then she invites Paul and his company to come and stay with them. He says, if you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay in my home. So here we have this powerful woman, no husband is mentioned, who has a household, and she becomes the center for the church in Philippi. I think that's really cool. And here's the thing, the narrative lectionary leaves that part of the story out. And so you might want to add that just to give some context, because that's a powerful woman. And that's an important part of the Jesus story. But our story picks up today in verse 16 of chapter 16, where Paul and Silas are cruising around in Philippi, and there is this slave girl who is possessed by the python spirit, or the spirit of divination. That's why I drew it like a python. And she's a slave girl. So you can see these are her slave masters in the background. Let's understand who this girl is. She is being exploited by her masters. This girl is doubly possessed. She has a spirit that controls her, that gives her a superpower where she can actually look into a person's life, and like a fortune teller, she can see what's happening, she can speak truth about them. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's part of the Greek culture to have these people who channeled this python spirit. But the thing is that she's being controlled by it, and she is a slave. She is owned by human beings who are exploiting her body for the sake of making money. So this is not just physical exploitation, it's also spiritual exploitation, turning spirituality into commodity. It's horrible. Well, she chases around, follows behind Paul and Silas for a few days, and is proclaiming the truth about them. These men are slaves of the Most High God, who proclaim to you a way of salvation. Interesting use of the word slave. We have two different kinds of slavery going on here, which is an important sociological commentary. So Paul, for whatever reason, he gets annoyed, and he speaks to the spirit and says, get him out of her. In the name of Jesus Christ, come out of her. So this girl, she's released from this spirit. Now, here's the disturbing part about this story. We don't know anything more about this girl. Like, what happened to her? She suddenly, we think, oh, wow, she's been set free from this controlling spirit, which on one hand sounds really good, and it is. But now she is just a girl who is still owned by her slave masters, but she doesn't have superpowers. So she's worthless to them. So we don't know. Did they kill her? Did they traffic her in a different way? Or did she escape? Here's my little hope. This is what I hope happened to this girl. I hope that she escaped and made it to Lydia's house and grew up to be a wonderful woman who knew she was a beloved child of God. That's what I hope happened to this girl, but we just don't know. Well, the story continues, because the main point of Luke telling this story is about what happens to Paul and Silas when they take away the money machine from these slave owners. They are dragged by the slave owners in front of the magistrates of Philippi, and they are accused. These men are disturbing our city. They are Jews and are advocating customs that are not lawful for us as Romans to adopt or observe. So they create this dividing line, this scapegoating against Jews and non-Roman citizens. And they falsely accuse them of upsetting, like, oh, this is all about our culture. But really, this is about money. This is about power. It's about control. So what happens? They're not interrogated. They're not investigated. They are not given a fair trial. They are simply condemned. They are flogged publicly, and they're put in prison. They are shackled. Now, you'll notice in my drawing, I'm just going to confess, I have them shackled by their hands, and the text very explicitly says feet. I don't know why I did that, but that's how it is. So there you go. But they're in prison. And here we are brought into this stark reality of Roman society. Roman society was all about control, power. The people who had the money had the power and were in control. And if you threatened their economic stability and their power structures, you were just put in prison. You were locked away. Your body meant nothing. And if you were not a Roman citizen, you had absolutely no rights. And so they could just throw you in that prison. And probably Paul and Silas were just going to be left there to rot and die. And who knows how many other prisoners were in there for similar reasons, innocent people suffering an unjust system. Well, when Paul and Silas are in prison, they begin to worship God. And they're in there for 3 days. Well, we don't know if they're in there for 3 days. That was the last story. They're in prison, though, and they worship God. So here's something that's so important to keep in mind, that Paul and Silas were so focused on their mission, that they are beloved children of God, that no matter where they are or what happens to them, they know that they are in the presence of God. And so they just worship God from the darkness of this prison, and all of the other prisoners can hear them doing this. And then the earth shakes and the shackles break open. All the prison gates break open. This is like a resurrection scene. This is like a reenactment of Jesus in the tomb. Jesus, who had been crushed by the oppressive powers of the Roman Empire and all of those evil power structures, locked away in the tomb of death. And then the earth shakes and he breaks free and he comes back to life. So now let's look and see what resurrection life looks like in this story. Now, this jailer comes on the scene. Now, the jailer, he sees that the gates are open, and he just assumes that the prisoners do what any prisoner would do, and they just escape. So now this jailer, he's under a system where if he makes a mistake, like allows the prisoners to escape, he's probably going to be killed by those power structures. So he lives in a world of fear and oppression as well. So the jailer is also a prisoner of this system, and he would rather do an honor killing, an honor suicide, take his own life, rather than be disgraced and punished and executed by the powers. But here's where the miracle happens. The prisoners aren't gone. Paul says, "Do not harm yourself, for we're all here." Even though the gates are open, they don't escape in a selfish self-protection. They see the jailer, and they share the good news of Jesus with the jailer. And so the jailer sees that Paul and Silas are living in a different way. When my pastoral colleagues was talking about it this week, and he said that they are singing a different song. And I just thought that was so beautiful. Paul and Silas were singing this song of worship and praise to God, even in the darkest circumstance. See, Paul and Silas were set free even before the shackles were broken, because they knew that they were beloved children of God and that their circumstances would never change that. And so this jailer sees that in them, and he's like, you've been saved from this system. What do I need to do to be saved? And Paul says, trust in the Lord and you will be saved, you and your household. And so this next picture, the way this scene ends, is that the jailer and his entire household are baptized. They're washed in the love of God. They are made new. They have a resurrection experience into this new life. And what is the picture of that new life? It's them preparing a table for Paul and Silas. Here, this is repeated all throughout Luke's theology, is that the picture of resurrection and new life is a table of fellowship, where parties who were before were enemies are now sitting at the same table and eating together. Oh, it's so beautiful. But the story doesn't actually end there. The narrative lectionary text ends there, but the story actually continues, because we get further exposition and expose of this corrupt system. Because once the magistrates who had oppressed Paul and Silas learn that they were actually Roman citizens, they realized that they broke their own rules and they unjustly prosecuted a citizen who does have rights. And so they want to brush it under the rug. They want to just let them escape. And so the magistrates sent word to let you go, therefore come out and go in peace. But Paul, he wants justice. See, the other thing that the gospel does, the gospel sets free those who are oppressed, and it calls out and speaks truth to corrupt power structures and seeks justice for all people. And so Paul, he says, they have beaten us in public, uncondemned, men who are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison. And now they're going to discharge us in secret. Certainly not. Let them come and take us out themselves. Paul wants justice. And so the magistrates come and they apologize. We didn't realize you were Roman citizens. Please leave. We don't want to be confronted by truth. We just want you to quietly walk away so we can get on with our lives. Well, Paul non-violently disobeys those rules. And what he does, where does he go? He goes back to Lydia's house. And in Lydia's house, he exchanges peace with Lydia, blesses this place. And then Paul goes on his way into Corinth in the next chapter. But it's such a beautiful picture. It's this whole scene is like a Lydia sandwich, right? It begins with Lydia. Then there's this confrontation of power structures of the slave girl and the jailer and all of that beautiful resurrection life, table fellowship. And then it comes back to Lydia's house. So there you go. That's my walkthrough. I've got a PowerPoint with 25 slides that will walk through each of these panels step by step, so that if you're teaching this story, you can use any one of these PowerPoint slides. You can rearrange them, edit out the ones you don't want. If you want that PowerPoint, just click right here and it'll open up this. You can type in 0 here if you want to download it for free, or you can type in a number to donate whatever price you want to help with the ongoing work of A Cartoonist Guide to the Bible. I appreciate that generosity. Here is a video that I made 4 years ago or 2 years ago when I preached this that does what I just did for you, but you can play that video wherever you want. And here's some commentary that has that all written down. So boom, there you go. That is our walkthrough of Paul and Silas. Hey, if you're teaching on this or preaching on it, or just studying it, I hope that these visual commentaries were helpful for you. You can join Cartoonist Guide to the Bible in a lot of different places. This is my Facebook page. You can sign up for the my Gumroad store. You can get those weekly emails. You can join us in the CB network if you want to get connected. So please share this with your friends and have a great week.